Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by Elaine Mason, Vice President of People and Communities at Cisco. Welcome to the show, Elaine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Nice to have you back again. How have you been?
I've been really well in COVID land. As you can see, I'm in my new office, which looks a lot like a bedroom because that's what it is.
Same here. Don't be fooled by the white background. Just behind this screen that we have here is my bedroom.
Very nice.
As well. So just like everyone's like, Chris, you're just in the Matrix every day now. I'm like, no, I'm trying to hide all the mess behind me as well. So you still working from home full time at the moment?
Yeah, it's looking likely. I'm in California in the United States. It's looking likely that through the end of this calendar year, I'll be working from home. And working for Cisco, we own telepresence units, we own WebEx. So
Yes.
Working from home is not exactly abnormal for my company. It's actually what we sell, and some of the product lines we're really great at. So the company is pretty used to working virtually. In fact, we pivoted to virtual. I think we were one of the first companies in Silicon Valley to immediately pivot to virtual for the entire organization globally.
Yeah. Well, you as I said, it's part of the DNA of the business, right?
Yeah,
The infrastructure
exactly.
was already there. It wasn't too difficult culturally and from a technological standpoint.
Yeah, it really was something that made it very easy for us. And I think it's one of those competitive advantages that we knew we had, but didn't know quite how much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we jump in, obviously for those that joined us at the last summit, you were there, so probably people remember you. So thank you so much for your contribution. It was an amazing day, and I appreciate you joining us.
Well, it was a great event, and I can't imagine another group that could have pulled it off as well as you all did.
I'll be honest, it was a stressful 4 weeks. 4 weeks building an entire summit and delivering it. It was 9 hours live stream for 9 hours. I'll be honest, I was pretty exhausted.
I can't imagine. That would have wiped me out.
Yeah, but it wouldn't work without amazing people like you that were willing to give up their time, especially with everything going on. So I really appreciate that as well. But give everyone a bit sort of an intro to yourself, your background, and sort of the role you're now in. So just to give people a bit of context.
Sure. So happy to. If anyone ever looked at my LinkedIn profile, you'd see that actually for the last 15 years or so, I've actually spent most of my career in organization development, talent management, workforce planning. And then if you look, I'm suddenly in a bit of a blip. So my role actually changed at the beginning of the year. Lucky timing for me, right around COVID. And what Cisco's HR function, which we call people in communities, what we're doing is actually really trying to make a pivot to how HR is run. And I'm part of that experiment. So what we've actually done, and I've been in now role for 6 months, is actually pivoted. My role actually was given to somebody that used to do business partner work. And I'm actually partnering with what we've been affectionately calling horizontal communities. And the idea of horizontal communities is actually, we know that most organizations are really set up well to work against the org chart, so work vertically. So you'll have an HR partner that'll be working with a business leader, and they'll support that business silo from end to end. And it's a very effective model. It's a way that a business leader has a really tight relationship with their client. And it's been used for 20, 30 years as kind of a core role, either a generalist or a business partner as a core role to the HR model. What we realized at Cisco is one of the big challenges we've had as an organization is we would tend to go toward being a bit siloed, and we wouldn't be able to see major trends as they were happening across the organization. And so the experiment, starting with me and then my small team that I talked about and we ended up agreeing to with my head of my chief people officer, was the idea of what would it be like to be a partner to those organizations that run horizontal against the org chart. So the typical organizations that run against the org chart in most companies are employee resource groups. So those diverse communities that are usually, you'll have like your connected Black professionals or your Latinx community. Those communities currently exist across the org chart. But what about communities like senior technical talent or new leaders, or one that we've been talking about right now is the phrase I've been using is the missing middle. Those people that are leaders of leaders, but they're not at the top of your organization. What happens if you organize them as a community, manage them as a community, invest in them that way, and give them the opportunity to create business impact across? So that's the grand experiment. Now, just to make the correlation between my old world and this job, I look at this as a workforce planning experiment where it's a new way of segmenting the talent. So you could think of it as critical talent pools, and then ultimately managing those talent pools. But what we're trying to do is see, can we run HR horizontally to be able to help the organization from an enterprise level And the big question is, if we can run HR that way, and if you think of HR running like a business, can you rethink the company? And can you actually flatten an organization and shift an organization from vertical to horizontal? And that question, we're trying to find ourselves, if you think about the continuum of hierarchy to holacracy, we're trying to figure out like where on that continuum can Cisco fall. So that's the grand experiment. And I could go in much more detail on it, but that's the driver behind it. And what has been my craziness for the last 6 months.
Yeah. Where did this come from? Where did this first come up in the team? You know, what drove this decision?
Yeah, we were looking at a trend that we were seeing across the organization of, for individual projects, we were very effective at gathering people, and this is not just in HR, but across the org. We were very effective at gathering the right people across the organization for high intensity individual projects for a short period of time. So we're releasing a brand new set of technology. We would be able to gather the right sales and services folks, the right engineers, and really run them across. But the minute the product would go live, that ability to work across wouldn't sustain, and groups would go back into their groups. And what we were finding is we would have situations like multiple groups doing the same thing without knowing it. So inefficiencies in the organization.
Yeah.
We could have situations where we're actually competing against ourselves, where our sales group would be selling one thing, but the way our engineering group was building something, maybe something different. And we were seeing all these things that could come up with either being about being in your silo or about just ways of our organization not thinking and working across. So as we saw that trend coming up, that was one trend. The parallel trend, put into my workforce planning days, is we started pitching the idea to our executive leadership team that we were thinking about our talent differently and wrongly, that we were thinking about our talent by function, about, you know, this person sitting in our engineering team, therefore they're X, Y, and Z, as opposed to looking at talent across. So for example, UX people, so user experience people. And what we were finding is we were investing in someone like a user experience person fundamentally differently if they were in engineering versus if they were in our services org, which meant sustainability of that talent, retention of that talent, recruitment of that talent was much more difficult as we kept it in silo. So from a workforce planning perspective, we were pitching the idea of what would it be like if you identify for our long-term strategy, the top 50 capabilities that we require as an enterprise. I don't care where they sit. And then treat them and basically invest in them universally the same way. And that those two things combined, seeing that we worked better when we work across and that we were missing opportunities when we didn't work across, and seeing that we had whole talent pools that did exist in multiple spots, but weren't retained in a material way, didn't have career paths, weren't people that we could recruit well. What if we try pivoting the whole organization to focus on that, and what would happen? So those are kind of the two big trends that kind of motivated us to do this experiment. The third trend, just to kind of call it, was we had these employee resource groups, which at Cisco we call employee resource organizations, and they were really good at building themselves within community. But the real demand that they were looking for was actually three things. They wanted to improve recruitment and retention of people that were similar to them in their community. They wanted to make sure they were doing deep development and deep sponsorship of the talent. And they wanted to have a business impact, like material, revenue generating business impact. And those groups were there attempting to do that, but in isolation, without having any support from P&C, the HR function, or other business groups. They were left to kind of swim on their own. So we had these groups there that just weren't leveraged.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I see that in most cases, in most businesses, as well. Sorry, sorry to cut you off.
No, that was it. So that's kind of why we're doing the experiment. I'm very much someone that jumps in first and then figures it out second.
Really?
And my CPO knows that, which is why she's like, "You want to go for it?" I'm like, "Sure, let's give it a shot."
Yeah. How have you gone about shifting the mindset then? You know, from resource management to driving HR like a business. You know, where do you even start on that? It's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. So I think you start first. We had the entire HR leadership team or P&C leadership team help do kind of a strong pivot of what are the business problems you want to solve. And I think the big way to help any change, whether it be a P&C or an HR change or any change in the business, is you start from your customer, who's most important to you. And if you start designing and working from that perspective, a lot of the changes that you normally find that are real barriers get overcome. It's the entire root behind design thinking, that you design from the customer in mind. And that was the exact approach we took at Cisco when we started thinking about HR and shifting ourselves. And what we were seeing was a couple of things that were kind of why HR would need to shift into a business mode. We were seeing that we were putting product out, that we were putting products into the marketplace. They didn't meet what our customer ultimately needed. That it was like really great academic exactly what the brainy people that are doing, organization effectiveness would say you need, but it wasn't what our customers said they needed. So we had this kind of gap between customer and product. We had efficiency plays that we were missing, that we'd have in some of our areas. We'd have operations groups that were redundant across the entire organization or duplicative for those people that are not in the UK, across the organization. And then what we were also seeing was ultimately that our business partners were trying to do jack of all trades. They were trying to be every single thing. So there was no scale that you could get out of them. So the business partner group was always suffocating for more people, or starving for more people, I should say. And because they were trying to get connected to their business, be very tight with their business, and it just didn't create any efficiency for us. So when we started thinking about our customer, what our customer wanted was products that were quick to market, that were relevant to them, access to all the experts that they needed from the HR or human resources space. And they needed to have a good understanding of what was available to them, translated for their needs. And that started shifting us to the business model. It's much more like a business, which would be you use your business partners as sales and marketing. They are not the expert on everything. If you want to bring in the expert, you bring in your product people, or in our case, our people that are running our talent programs and so forth. And then ultimately, there's a lot of services that HR can provide that are very much kind of a run the business type of service, much like a customer experience group in most organizations. So we actually combined all those customer experience groups and put them together, and are getting tremendous value out of running a majority of organization as a portfolio. So the shift started, though, just to kind of recap it, started from a customer demand. And I think that's always the key for any major shift.
Amazing. How far are you into this role or into this journey?
We are, as an organization, we're about 6 months in. We were luckily timed. We started the org change right at the start of COVID. Lucky us. And actually, I can't even say that, because our office is in APJC. So our Japanese and China offices actually started dealing with COVID in December. But we were already kind of going on that road in the February, March timeframe. So we're about at the 6-month mark. And some of it's working great, some of it's not.
Of course, and that's part of it. So what steps have you taken so far? So what's going well, and what do you think you could have done better, even though it's only 6 months?
It's a great question. So I'll speak on my role, and then I can kind of talk for our larger organization. So for my role, for what has happened in the last 6 months, is probably a little bit not unpredicted, but timing has been really relevant. As I said earlier, I was working with our employee resource groups. And about May timeframe, we had the George Floyd murder in the United States. And as a result, the focus on social justice, and the focus specifically on the African-American Black community, has profoundly magnified. And this has happened before in the United States history and in other countries worldwide, where there'll be a moment in time where something has happened to a specific community, and that community is very visible. And then over time, people fatigue out, and we end up not seeing it. In the case of what's happened with George Floyd, some of the real changes have been around the social justice movement is still going. Protests are still going. It's become a worldwide effort. And it's connecting to other things that have been happening in other communities, like our Pan-Asian community right now, as a result of COVID, is experiencing racial bias they've never experienced before.
Yeah.
Our Latinx community has been experiencing bias very similar to the Black African-American community. So in my role, what we found was the role of thinking about the horizontals. Originally with the ERGs, the employee resource groups, we were like, they are important, but we want to think about these other groups. Suddenly, the magnification of the power of these groups is tenfold. And just to give a representation, our employee resource groups and networks at Cisco make up roughly 29,000 of our employees of 74,000 people. So about roughly a third of the org. So the pivot for me, I'd say, I was already investing in getting connected to those groups, but the profound nature of how we needed to build our listening skills to those communities, and how to make sure we gave those communities an audience, we weren't moving fast enough. And I think that was kind of my first aha. The second aha for me, which happened probably around, about 3 months ago, was those non-traditional horizontal communities I was sharing earlier, like Missing Middle, have direct connection to the ERGs. And here's how. If you think about what you need to make as a change in an organization, like a great challenge we had as an organization is right after the George Floyd murder, a lot of leaders were going, well, what do I do? How do I talk to people? What do I say? And the paralysis of those people that have never talked about race before, and the fear of making mistakes just multiplied hugely. So suddenly you have this entire group of leaders that we had not assembled before, but have direct impact on those 29,000 people that we're talking about. And so if I could rewind the clock in March, getting those communities that were horizontal, that were most critical to the organization up and running faster, would have made it that the minute that murder happened, the minute we started seeing Cisco's repositioning on social justice, we could have flooded them with, here's how you have those conversations. Here's what the conversation looks like. Here's what learning looks like. And here's where you're going to make mistakes. And we could have connected those groups. We weren't ready for it. We still don't have the middle management group up and running yet. So I think for me, that's where there's a miss of seeing that there wasn't, those horizontal communities have tremendous connection, even with the ones that were already established. The other thing for me is technology, where these communities right now at Cisco talk through a lot of different means. They have ye old 1990s email distribution lists. They have chat through WebEx Teams, which is kind of our internal and also available for external marketplace ability to chat. To catch what was going on in those communities, to be able to connect into those communities was so analog that it did not give us the ability to really help give measurement, give guidance, give information, take information, and have that push-pull as fast as we'd want. We knew we needed to put them on some sort of platform. We are moving toward that platform, but if I could rewind the clock, I would have gotten them on a platform in like April. So then when things were changing, we could have gotten them to faster information and responded better. So I have a lot of kind of that for me of, oh gosh, if I only knew then what I know now, that I would love to have done.
About many things. There's not, you can't kind of beat yourself up about that.
Yeah.
The good thing is that you're taking the learnings from it now and actually making and doing something about it. That's the key thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well. What aside from that, kind of did this I'm sure everything going on, did that derail the project in any way?
No, I mean, no, I think actually just accelerated us. In fact, yeah, what Cisco did and what Cisco has been doing since COVID is we've been having semi-weekly, it's either been weekly and we're just switching to bi-weekly check-ins, whole company check-ins. And we started it with COVID, which was to make sure people were informed, because as everyone globally has experienced, the information that's available is so widely variant that we were trying to make sure that as a company, everyone had some of the basic information that we as a company believed was accurate, US and abroad. And we started those check-ins. When the George Floyd incident happened, we included racial disparity into that check-in. We included social justice into that check-in and really pivoted as an organization. So the things that we did with the community that we'd never done before was all of my ERGs have global leaders that kind of run that community. We started making sure that our executive leadership team and those ERG leaders were actually meeting and actually having a conversation of what it feels like to be at Cisco. Those things, ultimately it accelerated us. And that conversation, I found out after the fact from my team members that came along that were previously the people running our ERGs, that they were trying to get that type of conversation organized and created for a couple of years. But that pivoted overnight. Like as soon as this happened, we were on a call on a Saturday night after right after the incident, right before our first check-in after the incident. And I'd said to our CPO and our head of legal going, I think we need to have these two communities meeting. And there was no fuss. There was no muss. It was, yes, of course. Why haven't we been doing it? Let's go. So I think we've gotten some acceleration as a result of both COVID and ultimately the social justice issues, which, like I said, who could have anticipated? But you got to lean into what's happening in your circumstances and make the best of it. And that's what we've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah. As I said before, I feel like we kind of keep going back and forth through these tragedies. I just hope now there's some significant change which sticks. And that companies really commit long term as well, which sounds like you're on the right track to doing that, which is really good to hear. In terms of the roles now, from sort of the business partner roles, how are you shifting from sort of business partner to customer success, from reporting to support to intelligence? What does that look like? Because it's a huge shift. You're a huge organization. This is not something that's going to happen overnight.
So it hasn't happened overnight, and we're running both vertical and horizontal communities right now. So we have community partners. We're calling everyone a community partner because we're redefining what community means. But you're right, it's customer success. It's absolutely customer success. If you go to any CX organization, that's how they would call it. And what we're doing is we're really trying to redefine what is the value proposition that this group brings. And I think that's the big shift. The community, the business partner of yesteryear, the value they used to bring was, I can tell you I can get you through HR. I can navigate you through all this HR stuff. You don't have to worry. There's nothing going on behind the curtain. Just follow me and I will guide you. That is very different from being a community partner and kind of focusing on customer success, which is I will listen. I will be a strategic consultant with you. I will navigate you to the right people, but I will not be the barrier between you and the right people. So what has been the biggest challenge has been getting our people that were formerly business partners into the community partner role to see the value proposition, and instead of being the face of HR, of being the
Gatekeeper.
the compass, the gatekeeper and face, to being the compass, which is basically, this is what you need. So what we're doing is really changing capability sets, where it used to be, I'm a really good firefighter, and I can now, and I will keep you safe, and I will I will put out those fires beforehand. And now it's a lot more of I'm going to hear what's going on in your organization. I'm going to understand it, make strategic judgments, and then guide you to solution, and have confidence that the people that are in the solution space are thinking from a customer perspective, running more agile, developing products more quickly. Therefore, I have confidence the product is going to be the right thing. It is very similar to, you think about sales of yesteryear, where sales of yesteryear, they'd know their product line, they'd have their playbook and kit, and they would never let an engineering person get in front of a customer. And now you have sales engineers, you have the bridging role, where someone who can talk product and talk sales.
Yeah.
What we are doing is kind of trying this experiment without that bridging role. So the big shift for our partners is really getting comfortable with not being the person in the room all the time, and having confidence that the people that are building the solutions get it. And I think, so it becomes much more of a listening organizational role as opposed to that firefighting. It becomes much more of a strategic, and the key value proposition, which I'd have to say our business partners are still trying to get to, is when you freed up all your time from not being a firefighter, you can suddenly start seeing trends and seeing things happening across the organization you haven't seen before. So I'll give you an example of how we're seeing that play out already at Cisco, which I think is going to be a huge benefit to the business. Is we have 4 different engineering groups at Cisco, and we're organized functionally. So most organizations of our size are business unit aligned, where you'll have kind of someone acting as the general manager for business unit, and they own their P&L. Cisco essentially has one P&L, and we run as one whole business. So we have 4 engineering groups, and all the engineering leaders, and I'm actually serving in a vertical role working with one of those engineering leaders, have come together, and we started talking about what are the talent issues that are existing across engineering. And we've actually started to see, okay, there's a talent issue where we need to start rotating talent that have different types of skills through all these engineering groups. So rather than being the engineering partner going, I'm just going to focus on my group and I'm going to rotate people within my silo, we're actually developing a rotation across that suddenly is giving the benefit to this business they haven't had before, of understanding of multiple portfolios of technology, new technical skills, and career paths for the employees are completely different.
I was about to say that. Yeah, they're going to be a lot more engaged, a lot more excited.
Right.
Loads of opportunities. Right.
And that only happened because the 4 engineering leaders were like, I'm hearing this problem, or you're hearing it too. Let's solve it together, as opposed to I'm going to solve it my own way.
Great.
So we're going to get those little peaks of opportunity, and that's early days for us, but we're starting to see those. We are seeing why that kind of thinking horizontally, thinking more strategically is starting to really pivot the value that we provide. But it's still, we're on the road, and it's a rough one.
How are you going about kind of training, reskilling these HR business partners then? Is it like group workshops? Is it one-on-one? What does that look like?
We are. So we have 2 things going on. First, right now, the big training method is trial by fire, which is, we just be very transparent. We spent a lot of time, especially as a leader. I'm part of the leadership team that runs all of our communities. We spent a lot of time really getting clear on the value proposition of the communities and the kind of core 4 pillars of what we're trying to deliver. And what we're doing now is, so it's not quite trial by fire, but we've pivoted to this model. We're trying to work through it. And what we've done is established an open microphone on a weekly basis that anybody from our community space can go into to ask questions. So it's through experience. What are you seeing? What are the questions you have about your role? In parallel, we're doing 2 other things. We've actually built learning paths we use Degreed as our learning platform. And we've actually built learning paths for each of those 4 pillars of what it means to be a community partner. And then we're also starting to put together what will training sessions look like. And we're going to be using podcasts, video casts, kind of very small nuggets of information so people can kind of learn at their own pace. So open mic is kind of for, learn from your peers, learn from your leaders every week, always available, always on. And then we have, online learning, learn at your own pace. And then we'll have these kind of video podcasts to make it kind of slightly interactive and also be able to be recorded and played back later. So we're doing all three, but the first write-in, we just flipped the switch and said, let's go for it. We got really clear on what the role was, got really clear on who, what the capabilities are, and said, we're going to try. And that's been a little bit of jumping out of the plane and then saying, oh, parachute, should bring that.
It's good though. I didn't not personally. I wouldn't expect that from a company like Cisco. No disrespect there as well. But it's really refreshing to hear, because we're in a kind of day and age where you need to move quickly. And I always describe my business like that, because I'm jumping out the airplane and build a parachute on the way down, and that's one of the keys to our success and what we do.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, even if you create the entire plan, it's going to change, and it's going to hit along the way. So you may as well jump straight in and learn, keep open communication with the team, and then it constantly evolves, right?
Yeah.
Based on what you're hearing.
Yeah, and the team wasn't blindsided. Like, we didn't go one day going, "Hi, you have a new job. Good luck."
Yeah, you've communicated it
and the horizontal team, right? Of course. And the horizontal team that I'm running is definitely like they knew going in that I basically said to them, if you don't want to be a venture capital, or if you don't want to be doing incubation of new communities, and you don't want to start up and fail, like, you don't belong on my team. In fact, when I was screening people to come into my team, I basically said, if you are not a fan of gray space, you do not belong here. Like, go to a place where they script. So, because my team is trying something. I'm like, it is truly an experiment, and we are making it up as we go. But for the Cisco people and communities, and especially our chief people officer, is very comfortable with experimentation, more than I've seen in any other HR organization. And it's one of the reasons I came to Cisco. Is she is very okay with trying and failing. And the big thing we all talk about is failing's okay, learn from it. And if you're not learning from it, that's when we're failing wrong. But that ability to experiment is really embedded in how Cisco P&C operates. So if you've been hanging around in P&C long enough, you kind of know it's like, yeah, you might be jumping out without having a net. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love it. What do you see in the next few months? What sort of the priorities in terms of KPIs? What do they look like? We had a few people on LinkedIn, actually, more than a few, that said, "What are the KPIs? What are you tracking towards? What does success look like for you, Elaine?"
So within my team, we have 4 measures of success right now. We probably have more, but my team, I've been trying to narrow us down. First is migrating all of our communities to standard platform, because like I said, they're all over the place right now.
Yeah.
And for us to be out doing good measurement, good listening, good engagement, we need a standard platform. We are using Salesforce actually as our platform, using Lightning. That's what we're going to migrate them to. So the first is kind of, in terms of a measure, is getting people migrating people off of old products, getting them on platform, and then adoption statistics. Like, are we at a 60% adoption, 80% or not? That's the first one. The second one is raising new communities. And what we want to do is be able to raise about 2 a quarter. And what that would mean is not that we're trying to raise hundreds of communities, but we have a prioritized list. And I'm not exaggerating here. Over the last 6 months across the organization, I've had roughly 106 recommendations of new communities at Cisco.
People have come to you saying, "I want to start a community."
Oh yeah, and it can be, some of them are very valid, business-minded. Some of them are a little random. So like, I am on the continuum of new leaders, which seems really kind of logical. Yeah, you should probably have a community for them, all the way to Dalmatian dog lovers. I've had the full continuum. Not that I'm not a dog lover. I do I have a pup. I love her to death. But there's, where does this add business value?
The business case for that group.
Yeah.
I want to hear the business case and a return on that.
You got it. So we're trying to raise like 2 communities a quarter is kind of the second KPI. And those communities need to be able to deliver on 4 things. They need to deliver on community organizing, so developing and growing that community. They need to deliver on external community impact, so investing in our external volunteerism or Cisco Foundation. The third thing they need to invest in provide delivery on is impacting culture, which means providing us with listening so our leaders can make better decisions. And the fourth one is business results, and that's that business driver you talked about, which is, how will this community ultimately help us either top line, bottom line, or innovation? I don't care where, but if they are doing something in top line and bottom line and innovation, that community has legs. So those are community KPIs that we have. But for my team, it's getting those communities up and running. The third one for us is really about starting to actually catch and make changes for enterprise-wide shift. So making sure that our products are actually changing enterprise-wide as opposed to changing just for silo. And then the fourth one, and this is probably the hardest one for us, is as we're moving toward a social justice platform, is making sure that the key actions that we've identified at Cisco, and you'll be hearing more in the next couple of weeks and months from Cisco of what we're doing from a social justice perspective. Hold on to your hats. We are definitely trying to see how does Cisco become. We're on the Great Place to Work list. We're actually right now #1 in the world, and how do we maintain that? So hold on to your hats. It's going to get big. That there are kind of measures in our social justice positioning that actually align to it as well. So we have community measures of success, and we have, for my team, measures of success as well.
Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, a bit of a random question, but when someone comes to you about starting a particular community, do they have to be a particular role in the organization?
No.
Is there any criteria around that?
We do have criteria that we've actually established. So anyone will come to me, and that's where I got the Dalmatian Dog Lovers group, and it is like lovely and great, but not for us. So yeah, what we've actually
look at to see, like, is this person, do they have the bandwidth, or is there a particular level in the organization, or the time in the business?
It's not about the person. It's actually about the community they're proposing. So is that community more than one geography? Is that community more than one function? Does that community want to organize? Because there are lots of people that want to get groups of people together, but then you actually talk about them and they're like, we don't want to work with each other. And does that community does the community have the ability to find people that can be global leaders and executive sponsors? Can they get that kind of executive sponsorship? And to your point about level, the only time level counts for me is that they have an executive sponsor that is at least L2 or L1. So either a direct report to Chuck Robbins, our CEO, or a level below. And those criteria themselves ruled out from the 106. I think we're down to like a queue of around 20.
Mm-hmm. I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, I'm very happy to have communities go and organize yourselves. Like, go ahead. If you want to do Dalmatian Lovers, nothing's going to stand in your way. But in terms of putting P&C resources behind it, we wanted to have some fundamental criteria. And what's interesting is we had some communities that have been organized over the last couple of years that existed as our employee resource networks that actually don't meet those criteria. And so for us, what we are putting together is a self-serve kit. We want to build a community that runs on its own. Here's your kit. And what we are doing is opening up the Lightning platform for those communities as well. So if they want to organize, we're at least giving them a place to go. But in terms of my team helping them with strategic planning and my team helping them around the 4 pillars, we're just not that big. And I'm not building an empire. I'm trying to keep my team really, really small. So that's kind of where we are at this point. But it's a great question.
Yeah, you mentioned when we first spoke about some of the Cisco experiments and leveraging sort of the venture capital model to incubate new communities. Could you sort of elaborate on that?
Yeah, that is why my team is you have to love the gray space. So what we realized was what communities need is what they need from a P&C organization is the scaffold. They don't need someone telling them how to have their day-to-day conversations, but they need kind of the frameworks that are in place, and all the frameworks right now are vertical. And we started thinking about what other industries work from a scaffolding perspective. We realized venture capital is one of them. And specifically, we started thinking about what do venture capital firms typically do. And they typically do 4 or 5 things. First, they tend to give funding. It's, they'll give seed funding to an organization. Well, I am in the HR, P&C space, so money is not exactly flush around here. So that's not something we could do. But the second thing you'll see a venture capital firm do is they'll usually kind of help incubate an idea. So some startup comes to them with a really good business case, and they'll say, okay, for the next 6 months, we're going to really work closely with you. We're going to help you build out your strategy, build out your foundation, build out your framework, and test it. Does this idea have legs? If the idea has legs, then a lot of our venture capital firms will actually put them in an accelerator and give them all the scaffold they need. So they'll go into a WeWork space. They'll have HR support, legal support, financial support. They just need to focus on their idea. And then ultimately, once they've kind of graduated and they've gone to either IPO, they will often have a board member who was formerly a VC. So what we're doing is the exact same thing. We have an incubator, which we've actually, called Startup because we're not that creative. And the startup team spends anywhere from 6 to 8 months on a new community and really works very closely with them and helps them build the scaffold in a very detailed way. Then the rest of my team is actually focused on what we've called foundation, which would be the accelerator. So it's a community that is existing today. How do they connect to our business consistently? How do they connect to our recruitment team consistently? How do they connect to our total rewards team consistently? My team's building that horizontal framework. So more of my team, more than anything, what they do is partnerships. So right now, just to give an example and put color on this, we had with our employee resource groups, we had basically 11 employee resource groups working with our recruitment team differently. So our recruitment team was pulling their hair out going, how do I work with all these groups? And going, it's the most ineffectual way we can work together. And the employee resource groups are going, I can't stand working with recruitment. We're just going to go out on our own because recruitment doesn't get it. when we started doing was we're like, what would it take to make every single one of those groups work effectively with recruiting, and started actually putting together, here's the role of role clarity. Here's the role of recruitment. Here's the role of the resource group. Here's where recruitment needs the resource group's help. Here's where the employee resource groups want to lean in. And we're basically building out, here's how we're going to work together, all 11 employee resource groups and the recruiting team. And suddenly it's like a cloud was lifted. And so we're just starting that process, but think about doing that for all the functions that exist in your HR function. And then we're taking it a step further and we're starting to say, how do we get these employee resource groups to impact the business and the bottom line? And we've done it with one group, which is our veterans group, which is a global group that focuses on people that have worked in the military services, and our public sector team, where think about how impactful it is for a public sector team selling into, for the United States, the Department of Defense. How much more impactful it is if they bring along a 3-star general with them who is from our employee resource group. Let me tell you, you get some credibility that way. So think about that. But for all of our groups, what would it be like if you're going into a women-owned company and you have women of Cisco sitting with you going, let's talk about what the women's experience like is at the organization. So we're really, what does it take to build those, that partnership is kind of where we're focused right now.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting, very intentional about it. And you can kind of link all those things together as well, and through process, not just through happenstance. As well. Where do you kind of, for you, what's sort of the main goals, moving forward? What are you most excited about? Let's just put it that way.
Oh yeah. So what I'm most excited about, yeah, it's a great question. You can tell I'm excited about a lot of it.
Yeah, I think I'm sure everyone listening right now, there's so much, and it's been, thanks so much, Elaine, so much information. I've got too many questions and not enough time. I feel like we need to do part 2 of the show.
Happy to. Yeah, so what I'm most excited about, it's probably 3 things. I think it's one, being able to really have these horizontal communities provide insight and impact in our strategic direction as a company, both from what it feels like living inside of Cisco and also what we actually can be doing from an external perspective as well. I think it's the first thing I'm super excited about. And that is both our employee resource organizations, but also these other horizontals. I think those combined yield tremendous force and power. I think the second thing I'm really excited about is figuring out what can be built as a scaffold and what doesn't need to be built as a scaffold. I'm really excited to figure out, and this is the organization design person that has been, studied this and loves this as an industry. There's been so many years of everyone saying, oh, everyone adheres to the org chart, and every HR person that is listening to this right now knows that when a leader comes to them and they say, oh, I need to redesign my organization, what they mean is I need to move boxes and lines for some reason. If we can prove out that the boxes and lines don't matter, like, game over. I'm done. I'm going to pack up my toys and go home. I've done my job as an org designer. So I think I'm very excited about that as part of the experiment. And the third thing I think that I'm most excited about is, if we do get this right, how will that fundamentally change the way Cisco operates? Like, can we actually see in the future, Cisco is one of those companies where 35 plus years in the tech sector. So we are considered, we've transformed a number of times. You talk about us 10 years ago, we were a hardware company. Now we're a networking company. Our revenues changed completely. All that being said, though, no one looks at us as new kid on the block. And if we can fundamentally change the way Cisco operates, I think we can end up doing something that's a significant reboot. And I know it sounds bizarre to say that a reboot for the enterprise could come from P&C or come from HR, but I'm delusional enough to think that it can. And this experiment is one of the ways that we're actually going to try it. So those are the 3 that I'm most excited about. But I'm also just excited about where we're going to fail and what are we going to learn from that too. I can't predict those yet, but it's coming, I'm sure.
Well, look, I think everyone can tell why you took up this new role and why your CPO thought you would be a good fit. Couldn't think of anyone else better to be in the role than you. And it's a really exciting opportunity. And I'm so excited you came on the show to talk about it, because there's not many other organizational leaders I'm speaking to that are actually doing anything along these lines as well. Especially during. Were there any companies that you looked at and saw that they're doing this really well? Because I don't know of any, and I speak to HR leaders every single day.
So there's some similarity between what we're doing, and I do mean similarity between what we're doing in some of the big 5 consulting firms. Some similarity in that space where they're changing the HR business. Where it's coming up is where people are shifting away from the 1990 kind of model. Has largely been in the HR business partner space, but they're just trying to figure out how do we open the aperture on it wider. You'll see it places like Accenture, they're doing it a bit. Qantas Airlines actually has done some experiments in that space as well. But this whole kind of real pivot toward horizontal and using Cisco's HR function as a sandbox that is kind of, it's not quite breaking glass, but it's certainly, you know, we're shaking things up.
Yeah. What do you think the impact's going to be for companies that don't do this?
It's a great question. I don't think it's going to be a one size fits all. And I think that was actually one of the biggest challenges and mistakes we've made as an HR industry. And you and I, before the call, started talking about David Ulrich, that he's been attributed to a structure, which I feel horrible for him because I think he's been way past it. But we've all kind of adhered to this structure from 20 years ago that he had proposed, not even as a structure. Some companies are going to stick in that place and they're perfectly fine. It's all what they want to get out of their P&C or their HR function. And so I don't think this is going to transform the industry. But I do think for those industries where they've been struggling with making products that come to market that are more meaningful, really being good at employee listening, really being customer centric, those companies where they've been looking at their HR function going, I wish we had that, this could end up setting the stage. But that's not everybody. And I wouldn't expect it to be. And what I'm hoping this results in is higher variation of what HR looks like in organizations.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, let's just stop it there. Otherwise, we're going to keep going for another hour, Elaine. before we wrap up with this sort of one parting piece of guidance to everyone, what would that be? And then where's the best place for everyone to reach out to you if they want to connect with you and say hello?
Oh, well, thanks for that. I'm so happy to have anyone reach out and say hello. For me, I'd say one of the biggest things that I would suggest is focus on the customer centricity. Anytime you're making choices in your HR space, what would your customers say about this? And the logic behind it that I often use with my team, and this comes to that HR as a business mindset, is they can buy this from the outside. Why are they going to want to buy it from the inside? So if you can kind of keep that in your head, that helps make a lot of your decision making a heck of a lot easier. That's the one thing I'd say. And then connecting with me, easiest is LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn nerd. I'm on there all the time. So feel free to send me stuff over on LinkedIn. I tend to respond pretty quickly, and happy to kind of talk about what we're doing and not only in the horizontal space, but even beyond.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, Elaine. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to catching up for part 2.
Thanks,
We'll
Chris.
do like
Thanks
6 months from now, we'll do like part 2 and we'll see where you are then. And we'll catch up. And also thanks to everyone who tuned in on LinkedIn. It's great to have you all with us. As always, sorry if we didn't get to all of your questions. I was so engrossed in the conversation that I didn't really get a chance. And by the way, if you are free next week or obviously July 22nd, actually, feel free to join us for the HR Leaders Online Summit. We already have over 5,000 HR executives sign up to join us. It's going to be an amazing day of workshops, presentations from chief HR officers around the world. So if you haven't signed up for that, click on the link in the description. We'll see you there. Elaine was there last time. She was amazing. And we're doing it again. But apart from that, Elaine, enjoy the rest of your day. And I'll see you again soon. Okay?
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Chris. Bye.
Bye.